What would you say, like if you think back to when you were first starting,
Yeah.
what was your motivation for getting into photography, and what worked for you?
Well, I came into photography out of a love of travel and documenting those travels. Even when I was a kid, we would go on family road trips around the U.S. and I would collect postcards and make a little diary. And my father also was into photography, and we would shoot 8mm movies, and we had a Konica camera, shoot stills. Or before that, I think we had a little Brownie or something. But we were always documenting our trips, and I really got into that. And so I think that need and that interest and desire to document trips started. And then when I was 17, 18, at a school, I would save up, money, and each summer I would travel for months at a time, get a rail pass, and just go around Europe. And I would do it with a camera in hand, but very basic. But I think that same approach is still what I do today. So maybe I have more technical knowledge, and I know how to get images out to magazines and such. And of course do book projects, which is a big deal these days for me. But my first real paying gigs in photography, I was doing the stills for the Merv Griffin show. So I used to be a still photographer on TV, on sets, and then I also did movie stills. And I think being in Hollywood, that was not a surprising way to go. That's where things were. And then I assisted for Playboy for years, and so I really learned, besides whatever everybody else can say, whatever about Playboy, but the lighting is pretty amazing. And so I learned really how to light. I was going to say light inside and out, but that's the wrong connotation, I think, for that. So, but I mean, I really learned lighting, and I think that's a key thing. Is and we were in so many different situations, and actually as an assistant, which I think is a very important thing to do. If people, starting out, if they can assist, first of all, get some knowledge if it's through school or whatever, because if you approach somebody to be an assistant, they usually hire an assistant because they have knowledge and they will be able to light and help out. I mean, maybe it's possible to be a second or third on a shoot, and you're more of a runner, and then you start asking questions, not to the photographer when he's about to shoot, but maybe to the assistants and that sort of thing. So for me, I think the combination of shooting stills on TV shows, where I was just using the existing light, that was set up by these great lighting directors, and then assisting, which taught me how to light myself, with the key factors for me then moving forward and having a portfolio to show. And then I had different portfolios for different sort of work. So I developed more of a fashion portfolio and a people photography portfolio and a travel portfolio. And then sometimes, depending on the client, I could mix some of the different aspects of both of those. And so but you have to know who you're approaching for a job, and then gear your portfolio accordingly.
Focal length. What range of a lens would you feel that you would be most important to someone kind of doing the kind of work that you do, the travel photography?
Right. For travel photography, if I could only have one lens, just like, I think there's a thing, for like a golfer, like if he just wants to go out and try to play with one club, which club would you play with? And I probably would play the whole course with a sand wedge, I think, but it might take a while to get around, but I'd have really great control. But for photography, I would just have a 28mm lens, because and what photographers, especially more beginning photographers that you're working with, have to keep in mind also is whether they have and they have to know if they have a full frame sensor or a smaller sensor. They must know that, because when you put a lens on, my 28mm lens on a full frame sensor is a 28mm lens. On many of the more consumer level cameras, it's a smaller sensor, and so a 28 actually becomes more like a 36, or depending on the camera manufacturer, it's a little bit more or less, and depending on the model. And all of a sudden, you're not getting the coverage you want. And for travel, you often are in a situation where you're backed up against something, or you want the wider scene. You can always move in close, and a 28 is not so strong, or not so wide, that you're getting horrible distortion if you move in closer. When you start getting toward a 24 or 20, when you have a full frame sensor, that's when you can start getting distortion. There's definitely times to use those sort of lenses. You know, when you really want a wide establishing shot, let's say the Vatican, you know, the whole thing, maybe you really want to go all the way out to, you know, an 18 or who knows. But I would say that the 28 millimeter lens is the perfect one for me. And then if I'm talking about a zoom, then I have, you know, 24 to 85, actually I have a 24 to 70, but I would say 24 to 85 is the perfect. If you can only have one lens, the 24 to 85 would be perfect. Or that coverage. Once again, I have to say that because so many of the people that you're working with will not have a full frame sensor, and they'll need to start more like at 17 or 18 in order to get what I'm talking about when I'm at a 28 millimeter. And so they must, you know, be aware of those numbers. But for portraits, for personality portraits, I often love, you know, an 85 millimeter lens. I think is a great focal length on the far end. And so once again, you know, if you have like a 55 or a 50 millimeter lens, you're starting to get close to that with a smaller sensor. And then I do have, you know, full array lenses. I have, you know, 12 to 24 for the really wide shots, and then I've got a macro lens, which is a 105, which is a great lens, and a 180. If you're a wildlife photographer, then you have to start thinking about longer lenses. You have to very seriously, and it's not a cheap avocation or occupation, but you need to start thinking about 300, 400, 500 millimeter lenses. So there's a lot of options out there, but I think the key is to not just start buying a ton of equipment, but to see, okay, I want to get this shot, but I can't get this shot because I don't have a long enough lens. I want to be a sports photographer. And I see all these plays, you know, like I'm practicing at high school football games. I'm out there and I'm on the sidelines and I've got my, 180 millimeter lens, and I'm still too far away. So I need to, you know, get a 300, even if I have to just rent it for the time being, you know, and play with it. And then you do that. And that's the only way to do it. So I would say let the situation dictate your equipment needs, and then build up from there. But also I'd like to see photographers not try to get an all-in-one lens, because you lose out a lot on that. If you get from a very wide angle to a super telephoto all-in-one lens, you know, maybe that's convenient because you can travel and you're not changing lenses. But the longer, at a more consumer level, that sort of equipment, the slower the lens, meaning the f-stop is more like 5.6, something like that, which means you can't shoot in lower light without going to a much higher ISO, which means more digital noise. And so I'd rather see people have a short zoom and then a zoom that goes from there, you know, for the coverage.